Okay, welcome to this episode of the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence podcast. Today we have the privilege of talking to Mikael Wiberg, who is a professor in informatics at Umeå University. And in this podcast we are trying to uncover and figure out and learn, maybe just me and Allan, everyone else knows, but we don't know anything about what actually is this human-centered artificial intelligence. And so far we've been talking to people from various disciplines, and we are a little bit wiser, but we still don't know. And hopefully today we might get a little wiser. But as usual, we don't think we'll be wise until we are in episode 238. So we're just one step closer today. But to start things off, Mikael, why don't you present yourself so we get to know who you are?
Absolutely. And thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having me. So I'm Mikael Wiberg. I'm a professor of informatics at Umeå University. I have held positions at other places as well. So I've been at Chalmers most recently in the interaction design division. And many years ago, I was also at Uppsala University, had a shared professorship in human computer interaction. So I've been in this field for quite a while. And then over the last few years, it has, of course, been lots of AI research on my agenda as well.
So you're a professor in informatics. What's the relationship with your definition of informatics and HCI?
So if you go out in Europe and you look at the informatics departments, most of those are computer science departments. Whereas if you go to the US, most people would say that informatics equals information systems. So I think that in our department, we have an interesting combination where we have one group of information system scholars, and then we have another group of HCI scholars. So our department is like one department, but with two main streams of research in it. So basically, on very general level, we think about informatics as sort of how to understand the use of information technologies, whether it's individuals or groups, organizations, or society at large. So it's about the use and design of such digital technologies.
Okay. You mentioned that in the last few years, you've also been focusing on AI, and this resonates with me and Matthias trying to figure out what human-centered AI is. Would you like to try and give us an elevator pitch of your view of what human-centered AI is?
Absolutely. And I guess I don't have the answer. So I guess there are many people coming together to form an understanding of what it is. But I'm thinking about, I'm also serving as one of the co-editors for the ACM Interactions magazine. And back in, I don't know if it was like 2018 or 19, we received an article by Wei Zhu, where he said that now we're in the third wave of AI. And we thought, well, are we really? And we thought, should we accept this or not? But we landed in accepting this article as a feature article in the Interactions magazine, where he talks about sort of the first two waves. So he talks about the early days of AI developments back in the 50s and 60s, and how that also faced the first AI winter. So the problem at that time was that the computers were so slow. It was just impossible to build anything close to AI. So the whole AI field faced a first AI winter. And then it took many years, but then back in the 80s and 90s, people were again very excited about AI. And then it died. It faced a second AI winter. And here the computers were better, but still it was very much lab-based, and it was so limited data available. So it was really hard to train these algorithms. So what he's writing in that piece is that now we're entering the third wave. And the thing is that now we have good computers and we have tons of data. And then the third thing is that it's leaving the labs and it enters society. And then, of course, when we come to human-centered AI, if AI is literally everywhere now in society, it also needs to be adjusted to people. So it sort of comes with a responsibility to configure AI in ways that serves human needs, basically. I can give a very concrete example of this. So we have been running a WASP HS research project. So WASP HS is funded by the Wallenberg Foundation, and it's this 10-year-long research program with lots of different projects within it. And we have one, it's called ASAL, where we asked a really basic question related to AI. And we said that, well, if AI is really for everyone, then let's try to explore that in a use context where we look into this. So we went for autonomous buses, and we said, okay, so if public transportation in a nearby future really is for everyone, then how do children with mild cognitive disabilities perceive these autonomous buses? So that was sort of the overarching research question in that project. And it was a super fun project. First, we thought that, well, maybe we can't do that much with these children. But it turned out that we could run design workshops and we could really try to look into the use context of autonomous buses and have meaningful discussions with them about their worries, their expectations, their needs, and also maybe their mental models, what they think this is. So that was very rewarding.
I'm curious also in where you got interested in AI, or where your research got intersected with AI. Was that with that 2018 submission to Interactions, or was it something before that as well? Or
I think it was around that time, but I also think that I have always been sensitive to shifts in our community. I mean, all of a sudden, everyone started to talk about AI. And I would say that in the beginning, I wasn't that interested because, I mean, my focus, maybe as you know, has always been about the fundamental question of what is interaction. And it felt like, well, is this a substitute for interaction? Is it that we will have less interaction in the future and we let the machines do more for us? Is that the case? So I actually wrote a paper with Eric Stoltemann, just recently accepted for the Personal and Ubiquitous Computing Journal, where we discuss if we're at the crossroads where, on the one hand, we have really good tools and support for interaction. And on the other hand, we now have these new AI tools which can automate lots of things for us. And I think that the conclusion we draw was that almost in every case, there is a combination of a level of automation and interaction. No matter if you save, say, a document on your computer, well, you can do it by clicking the save icon and putting in a name and so on. But exactly where it's stored on the physical drive, that's something the computer can take care of. And we can think about ChatGPT in a similar way, like, well, we have some basic needs. We want to find out something. And then part of that stream of interaction is something for the computer to take care of. So I guess it's kind of interesting that for many years I've been interested in materiality and to think about physical ways in which we interact with computers. And here it felt like with AI, isn't that all about the cloud in a sense? So it has very little to do with sort of material aspects of computing. But then, just the other week, I went to the HCAI conference and I listened to this wonderful keynote by Kate Crawford, the author of Atlas of AI. And the title of her talk was Dematerializing AI. So she could illustrate with lots of data, lots of references to related research and so on, how it's not just that AI is in the cloud and that it's very abstract, almost like a super force or something, but it's actually heavily intertwined with our environment and ways of working and so on. So there are all these material aspects to it. And I found that super inspiring, and it felt like I can still keep my focus on interaction. I can keep my focus on materiality, but I can sort of push it now in this new era of AI.
Okay.
Have you had a chance to think about, I mean, Kai ended just, what is it, a week ago or something like that. But could you give an example of what is the materiality of AI?
So some of the things she talked about was how there's an obvious environmental footprint of AI. So she had all these numbers on how, if you have a conversation with ChatGPT, for instance, it's like a bottle of water being consumed just to cool down the data centers. Or she had another example where they're now actually thinking about building mini nuclear plants on the data centers just to provide the data centers with enough energy, since the grid isn't up and running for that kind of capacity yet. And then she said that the problem with that is, of course, that we still haven't figured out what to do with nuclear waste. So there are very concrete material aspects beyond the things we see on the screens. But she also talked about more abstract things like how it changes our view of sort of what is knowledge. So beyond, going to the books or the papers, we now trust generated text, for instance. So it changes, it's sort of ontological and epistemological change as well. It's how we see the world and how we think we can gain knowledge about the world. So there are sort of something I would call sort of a hidden materiality. Whereas if we compare it to tangible interaction and so on, it's very obvious. But here it's more in the background, but still it's something maybe we should pay more attention to. I mean, almost to the extent that when you invited me to this, I was thinking about human-centered AI, and then I thought about the more than human movement we see right now in HCI, and then I thought about more than human-centered AI, to think about also when we need it, if we really need it, for what purposes we need it, and so on. So actually, I talked to some colleagues who said that now they're, given that it consumes so much fresh water, they start to be careful about when to use ChatGPT for such reasons. So the material aspects are there, and it influences their use of these AI services. And also, I'm thinking about for what reasons we're using AI. If we think about AI from a more than human-centered perspective on AI, one thing that has been all over the place is that AI can make us more efficient, and it can speed things up, or we can deal with more information and so on. But what if we think about ways of using AI that is not only for humans, but maybe for other species, or for, if we think about sort of climate changes and so on, if we can make forecasts and predictions about where we are going and so on, then maybe to be human-centered can also be maybe to extend it a little bit to other things on this planet.
Not only human or humanity-centric, but also, everything-centric AI.
I saw that, I mean, both Ben Schneiderman has this new book, Human-Centered AI, but also Don Norman has a new book on humanity-centered design. And I can understand sort of the basic argument that it needs to serve humanity and so on, but I also think that we need to think even broader and think about not just the future of humanity, but also maybe the future of the whole planet with all its plants and species and wildlife and so on.
So following that train of thought, I was looking at the opening page of the last issue of ACM Interactions, where you have this stance that resonated with me saying, how about going the other way and exploring a human-centered rather than a machine-centered approach to human AI conversations? Is that a way to go to also improve the humanity-centered aspects of things? maybe?
Absolutely. I think you're right. And I think we really need to play around with different perspectives and see how we can see things differently. Just to shift perspective, open up new doors for us, I think. And yeah, I think that we wrote that sort of editorial welcome to that issue of ACM interactions to highlight one of the papers we had in that issue where two authors from Google has thought a lot about prompt engineering and sort of what that is. And prompt engineering has been sort of a popular topic over the last year where people have said, well, maybe it's part of the future work that we prompt these machines and so on. And what you're saying in this article is that, well, that is still based on a sort of machine understanding. So we need to change our language to prompts that the chatbot can understand. And it reminds me of the early days of Google, where you had to write like site and then which site and then this word plus this word and so on. It was very sort of a SQL formed way of speaking to a search engine. Whereas now you can almost ask it any question and it gets it. So maybe in not far from here future, we can do something similar with these AI systems. So they have a better understanding of meaning instead of just the words we type.
But while these systems then have become more conversational, so more human-centered, the cost or the ecological cost is a cost for humanity instead.
That's true. So I think that's one line of development where it gets more human-like. But on the other hand, we learn from the young ones. So I had lunch with our son, and he said, have you seen what ChatGPT 4 can do now? And I said, no, not really. And he said, well, just look at this. And we were sitting at campus in a cafeteria, and he just took his mobile phone and just took a photo of the cafeteria. And then he just wrote in Swedish, he just wrote, explain, förklara. And that's it. No more prompts than that. And what we got back was just amazing. So it wrote, well, I see a picture here of a cafeteria. There are lots of young people, probably students, and there's also some whiteboards. So there seems to be some kind of informal teaching session going on here. And if we zoom in on the whiteboards, we can see that it's like in physics or mathematics or something. And more specifically, it's these formulas where the students have tried to calculate, and they got it right until the third line, where it should actually be a 4 instead of a 3, and the correct answer is this. And that was super impressive, just from a picture and one word, like explain. So maybe in the future, we shift things around a little bit so it gets what we're interested in. And we don't really need all the hassle of explaining and having long conversations with it. At the same time, I mean, we have problems with automatic, what is it called, windshield wipers, where they don't really get if it's raining or not, and so on. So we have had these problems of interpretation of sensor data and so on for many years. And I just wonder what happens now when we transition from super simple tasks like keeping the windshield clean from rain to more advanced, maybe knowledge-intense work where we need really good advices, maybe say for a doctor with a patient or something. So the level of complexity raises here.
Yeah, then it becomes an issue of accountability, transparency, interpretability, not only a matter of design and interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So in your work on digital materiality, have transparency, accountability, and so on, those terms existed in that type of work? Or is it only when AI came into this, they appeared?
I think it has been there, but more in the background. So anything you digitalize, you have these recurring discussions about ethics and so on. But I think that with AI, it has been foregrounded when it comes to responsible AI, transparent, and so on. But I think that for me, in my work on this basic question of what is interaction, I think that for me, it adds some extra dimensions. I mean, sometimes interaction is described just as this loop going back and forth between a human and a machine. The problem with that is that it doesn't say anything about what the computer adds to the interaction or what you add as a user. So I think that's what I try to describe in that book, The Materiality of Interaction, where I really try to bring those pieces into a small model. And it was not to propose something new, but rather to pick up on some really old stuff. Like Douglas Engelbart, he talked about sort of material qualities in relation to computing. And then there has been other attempts as well. But as we arrange systems where the computer can add things and we can add things, then of course it becomes super important to consider these things. Just think about bias in AI systems, for instance, how people are represented or misrepresented, or some are rendered invisible, or others are privileged, and so on. So also beyond the most straightforward aspects of AI ethics and so on, we should also think about who is this technology for? Who is privileged and who is not? So there has also been articles on this for the hidden labor surrounding AI. So in the third world, people are sitting there trying to filter data, categorize data, scrape data, and so on to make these AI systems good as they are, and still they have all these problems with bias.
So I've asked this question to a few of our guests, and it resonates with what you just said. We have human-centered AI as a tool for design, for thinking about the interaction, and then we have fairness, accountability, transparency, ethics, that sort of movement around those terms. And I always want to figure out relations between topics, and I often struggle with figuring out the relation between human-centered AI and facts. How do they relate?
Well, academics, they always find a third way of answering. So I'll try the third way here and say that I guess in any design-oriented field, like HCI or interaction design, or I guess computer science is also sort of design-oriented in that we're seeking solutions, or we try out new concepts and see how it works. And I think that design-oriented fields, they're not just trying to explain things, but they also want to suggest, propose things. So in that sense, we are also normative. And given that we're normative, I would like human-centered AI to be the umbrella term to think about what's the future of humanity in that sense, and then maybe ethics and transparency and just ways of scraping data and copyright and deepfake and everything is these are elements in this area. But it's really hard to go the other way around and say that we should have an area of, say, AI ethics, because that might just be a long ethical discussion about all the problems we see. And it's really hard to be normative in like an AI ethics field, because I guess the more critical you are, the better you are. So there's also a balance between being aware and informed and critical, but also still be able to do things, because I think we should also be in the driver's seat, and we should form this technology as the way we form other technologies to serve human needs. But we should also, of course, be aware of what I call them the hidden materiality, like the environmental footprint or the ways in which it it is related to, say, social justice or inequalities and so on. Who's being served and who is rendered invisible.
So with that in mind, if we go back to what you said very early on about this paper that you talked about, the first wave, second wave, and now we're in the third wave of AI. Was there any HCAI in the first and second? Or is it only now in the third that HCAI makes sense?
Well, I also think that over these waves, sort of what makes sense has shifted. So if we go back to, I guess, both the first and second wave, it served a very different purpose. So it was very much about understanding how the brain works. So if we can build a computer system that sort of demonstrates some kind of intelligence, then maybe we can get closer to an understanding of what intelligence is and how the brain works and so on. So during the 60s, there were tons of books written about the brain, ways of designing artificial intelligence in such a way. Whereas I think now, when I were at the HCAI conference, and they mentioned that there were 46 sessions devoted to AI this year. So that's a lot. But they said that the problem now is that almost no one talks about this notion of intelligence anymore. And maybe it would be more accurate to talk about like statistical probability models. But they said that wouldn't be as cool as talking about artificial intelligence. But it is a worrying shift, because if we go back to the 60s, there were lots of things written about what's the difference between intelligence and knowledge and wisdom. What is reason, for instance? There are lots of books on that. Whereas now it looks like it has shifted in the third way to more like, how can it be used? And it's very pragmatic. So we explore it in the arts, we explore it in design processes, we explore it in creative writing sessions, or we explore it, for architects, for authors, and so on. So now it's all about exploring all the different use cases, use contexts, and maybe we need to face a third AI winter and come back to, if we think about this also as a new form of intelligence, then what role should it play in society? Should it be like in the Minority Report? Is that a scenario we want? Or should it be more like something we can turn to, like a search engine? Or what role should it play? There are lots of companies already who are using it when they hire new people, for instance. So they filter out the top applicants. Is that something we want or not? And as in the same way as we still have lots of search engine optimization when you design a new web page and you try to optimize it. Soon we will probably also have CV optimization tools so that they're not filtered out by these AI systems and so on. And I'm not sure we want that. I think that we should have human-centered AI that serves us, but I'm not sure we should build it as tool to replace us.
Listening to you talking about the waves and how it's different from the 60s and stuff, it makes me think about perhaps there's some connection here to also when computing in general became more interactive, becoming from mainframes, a lot of diodes, a lot of dials you can turn and stuff, but it's not really useful. Like, it's hard to use the computing, right? It can calculate the trajectories of your missiles, but it takes a long time to make it do so, right? To us, in the late 70s, 80s, getting interactive computers and the personal computing, all of a sudden we started getting an explosion of applications. We actually start doing stuff. And now we're getting to what you talked about, our artists can start using computers to draw and things like that. And now you're saying, well, now we have AI systems and now it's capable, and we can use it for art and other things that before it might have been very hard to, develop a system and train it and get the data and acquire the computing center and stuff like that. Whereas now it's kind of readily available. Is that the sort of shift here? Is that the kind of the wave we are in, where things are available? And
I think so. And I also think that it's interesting interesting how, as a field, we have looked at other technologies over the last 20 years where all of a sudden one business is replaced by a new technology. So for instance, it is this saying that there are not that many record companies anymore. We have Spotify. There are not that many taxi companies anymore. We have Uber and so on. So there comes a digital service like Spotify or Uber or something that really changes the landscape. And here, maybe we have thought that we can resist the change when it comes to writing or the arts or design and so on. But now we have generative AI. And it's interesting how just a few years ago, there were lots of papers published on how, well, AI will just replace, simple tasks, routinized work, and so on. It will be the most simple things. And maybe that was a way of, staying in the safe zone. But I guess what we can see is actually the other way around, that it's really good at solving really complex tasks. It can even suggest what to do when you face a paradox and so on. And it's actually really good at those things. So maybe if we're moving from a third to a fourth wave of AI, it also has to do with not just applying it in different places in society, but also accepting that we might need it for really complicated tasks, especially tasks like wicked problems and so on, where you don't really have a clear, simple solution.
Yeah, where it's not the intellectual work that's necessary, but the manual labor. We've eliminated ourselves from intellectual work, more or less, with the latest models. Which is kind of interesting because that's not really what we've been striving for. But in this process of developing more and more, advanced AI, where should we stop and start thinking about the human-centered aspects of it? So should we really think about how we interact with all these things when we train machine learning models, when we develop new algorithms, or is there something else we should be doing?
So I think that sort of on a broad general level, it's not that much we can do. I mean, the race is on when it comes to the large language models and so on. We will have these systems, but we can also change practice. And for years, we have talked about, human-machine entanglements and sort of how we're increasingly entangled to the extent that, if you forget to bring your laptop or your mobile phone when you go to work, you will feel like you can't do anything. You almost feel a bit naked in a sense. You're missing something really essential to you. So we're deeply entangled with these things. At the same time, it's really hard to stay away from it. So to not use technology is impossible. But maybe there's a third way here, so that we can also think about sort of meaningful disentanglements, so that we can have, AI-free zones, for instance. Almost like on Instagram when people post and they have this hashtag no filter. Maybe we can also write papers where we have like hashtag no AI. Or we have journals that says we accept AI-generated papers. We're only interested in the empirical results, for instance. So it doesn't matter if you're good or bad at writing. It's not like a writing competition. It's all about the empirical results from research. I saw this short research commentary published in Nature with a footnote that said the authors also thanked ChatGPT for checking the language and giving suggestions on the structure of the piece. And I'm thinking if Nature allows this, then all the other journals will follow. So maybe we need it, but then maybe we should also have, like in the arts, where we have art exhibitions and so on, where we also have, like AI-free zones where we just appreciate life without AI. And we can also think about, the future work. We can think about sort of what we digitalize with AI, and for what we should, speed up processes and be more efficient and so on. And then other aspects of work, which might be that we just want to create a space for people to hang out there and have a good time. But I think that when it comes to AI regulations and policy work right now, it's just so high level. It's just about how AI should be free from bias and it should be transparent and so on. But I think we really need to break it down to the level of the individual and think about what kind of different AI futures can be imagined, and how do we see AI as an active or passive player in such alternative futures?
All right. These were very wise words. I think this is a nice wrap up of this episode on our search for HCAI. Thank you, Mikael, for helping us on our path. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And maybe just as a little concluding thought here, I think that when it comes to AI research, we have been very occupied with the present. I mean, we study different contexts where we have AI and we think about if people like it or not, and if it's good or if it's harmful, and so on. But also to think about, visions of the future, to think about prospects, to think about sort of where we're heading. I think we can learn from the 60s in that sense, and maybe become better at sort of picturing the future and what kind of AI tools we need to develop to get to that stage. So again, I mean, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with both of you.
Thank you.